If Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine had won the Electoral College, would there be a shutdown right now? The Democratic Senator Tim Kaine telling me no. I just caught up with him for a wide-ranging interview. His first on the beat, covering the Putin news, the Mueller probe, if Bill Barr should be confirmed. We began, though, with the shutdown and whether Kaine blames Trump or McConnell.
It's a Trump shutdown that is being protected and enabled by Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans. Obviously, the House wants to reopen government. They've already passed those bills.
When you look at the negotiations, it feels like we're going backwards. Is that right? Are we any closer?
Well, the Democrats are really unified on this. We're very glad to have a discussion about border security and immigration reform, but we are very strong on this. You got to open government first. We're not going to let you punish people who are trying to get food stamps and punish TSA workers in order to get us to have a dialogue about something.
Is there a date at which point, in your view, it has a national security impact?
It has it right now. President Trump went on TV and said, and then in tweets saying, I'm trying to protect the safety and security of the American public. If that was the case, why would you not pay the Coast Guard that interdicts drugs? Why would you not pay U.S. Marshals, FBI agents, 13,000 FBI agents? Why would you not pay prison guards? Why would you not pay food inspectors? Why would you not pay the people in the air traffic tower?
They used to say there's no atheists in foxholes. Are you saying there's no hardcore shutdown libertarians once you're airborne?
I think that absolutely. Who would be pro-shutdown if you're in the middle of the air?
And as for the Mueller probe, as a legal matter, Kaine is, of course, one of the victims. He was the running mate in 2016. We discussed candidate Clinton's famous allegation against Trump.
Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
Given what's happened, I asked Senator Kaine, was Clinton right in 2016? You were running mate on the campaign against Trump. At the time, Hillary Clinton said that Donald Trump was a puppet of Putin. Was she right?
Well, whether he's doing it by intent or accomplishing the objective even beyond Vladimir Putin's wildest dreams, the thought that an American citizen, much less somebody who wanted to be president, would stand up and say, hey, Russia, you're our principal state adversary. Go ahead and hack to help us win an election. That an American would voice that thought was anathema to me. And the fact that candidate Trump did it, I thought was outrageous. Nothing that's happened since has surprised me. And the most recent news about President Trump trying to shield and keep secret the content of his conversations with Vladimir Putin. We've been aware of that in the Senate because when we tried to get read into the Helsinki meeting, for example, we were not getting any details about it.
On that last point you raised, what's the bottom line for Americans? Is the concern that Donald Trump might be hiding the contents of the Putin meeting because he's getting orders from Putin at the meeting?
There could be a whole series of concerns. It could be sharing of bad information. It could be making commitments about what we'll do in Syria without briefing the Armed Services Committee. I can imagine many things, but rather than imagine those things, I think the right answer is make sure we absolutely protect this investigation and get all the answers. I do caution Democrats, don't jump to the end before the Mueller investigation is done.
So you're reserving judgment on that?
I think we have to.
We have to. Well, that leads to the big question in Washington right now. How will anyone make a judgment on the Mueller probe if Trump's new attorney general won't let people see it?
There are a lot of issues that I have, Ari, and I've not sat down with the nominee personally, and I hope to do that before there would be a floor vote. The single biggest issue, and this is an issue of intense national significance, is to get him absolutely on the record that he will protect the Mueller investigation until it is completed, and he will make sure that Congress and the American public sees the results of the investigation. Now, he made some comments.
He did not commit to releasing the full report.
That's true. He's made some comments in a letter to Lindsey Graham and others in the last 48 hours saying, I respect Bob Mueller, that's good. I'm going to protect the investigation. But he didn't make the commitment about making it public. I think he said something like he would be open to making relevant portions of it public. This is of such critical importance to the nation, the integrity of our election. What could be more a matter of public interest? I want to eyeball him and ask him this question. Okay, if you won't make the commitment, why wouldn't you? What would be in this report that you would worry about letting the American public see?
Why couldn't people see it?
Yeah, it's so important.
Bill Barr's refusal to make that commitment is part of why Kaine's colleague, Senator Feinstein, is announcing tonight she intends to vote against him if he won't make that pledge. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.